Okay, our next speaker, thank you, Allison, thank you, David. Our next speaker is Kelli Campbell, who's the Digital Learning Officer of Discovery Ed. And just to let you know, at the end of, during lunch, we will have topic tables, and Kelli or someone from her team from Discovery Ed will be at a table. So if you don't get to her question her afterwards, you can sit there and talk one-on-one.
All right. Thank you. Good morning. And I do have to say that when I'm watching that video, yeah, I was going to say that this isn't mine, but that's okay. I could talk to that too. Your video actually showed a family where it was the kids were in there and they were on iPads, and then the kids left, and then the parents were eating and they were on iPads, and then the mom falls asleep on the couch. That's my house. So it was a very accurate representation of at least what's going on in my neck of the woods. So yeah, this actually looks more like mine, except it's about halfway through the beginning of the slides. No problem. Here we go. All right. So I am Kelli Campbell. I am the Digital Learning Officer for Discovery Education, and I will do just a little bit of a level set on who Discovery Education is so you have a context for why I'm here and what I'm going to talk about. So Discovery Education is a part of Discovery Communications, so we have all the networks around the globe that many people are familiar with, whether it's Discovery Channel, Animal Planet, Science Channel. In Discovery Education, we have the great opportunity to take that content, bring it into classrooms. And we've taken it one step further. So beyond just the video that people think of when they think of Discovery, we've created interactive learning experiences, game-based environments, simulations, as well as text resources and audio resources into classrooms around the world. In the US, we're in about half of all US schools with one or more of our subscription services. So what I thought I would talk about today when it related to the ROI of play is where we are in K-12 education. I'm going to focus a little more specifically on the US, but where we are today, where we've been, how we got to where we are today, and then a little bit about where we're going. But I am first going to ask my colleague, Elizabeth, to come up and help me out because I figure I better practice what I preach and get everybody involved. So, see, most of you have some sort of device in hand. I'm going to ask you to pair up, or you can be independent if you choose not to collaborate and maybe you're just really competitive. So find a partner, think of a name of what you want your team name to be, and go to kahoot.it. So again, that's kahoot.it. Should be a very simple screen you're seeing. It's going to ask you to enter a game pin. You guys get into that? I gave you the right URL. One phone, one device per group. We got Noah. Yeah, I think that must be Noah cheering there. So just pick out a name, enter the PIN, which is 695657. Here we go. We got some players entering up here. We got a chicken. Guessing somebody actually works for PBS. There is a message that if you use profanity, it's going to knock you out. So sorry about that. No dirty words. All right, so we're going to have 5 questions. I can tell this is a very competitive bunch here. These are all research-based questions related to play and digital learning. All right, we got 44 players, 45. They're still adding really quickly here. Okay, here we go. Let's kick it off, Elizabeth. Start out with question 1. Are you ready? All right, research shows that when text is combined with what, students' background knowledge is enhanced. Is it red images? Is it images and sound? Is it sound or illustrations? You should be, if you're on a touchpad, just pick one of them. Oh, you guys are fast. We got 40-some answers. This is a quick group. All right, it is images and sound. All right, we had the vast majority of the audience select that. Yeah, sorry if we knocked people out before they got on. So a little bit of background on this. So this is related to cognitive load, right? So if you are reading something or you're viewing something, you can maintain a certain amount of that information. If you combine it then with some sound over top of it, it's another part of your brain. So we take a look at that very closely, combining both visual cues as well as auditory to get more of that actual cognitive information retained. Question number 2, actually we got to see who's in the lead here. We got 37 groups tied probably. Actually 3 gals, like that. There they are in the back of the room. All right, next question. Okay, according to research, the use of video-based scenarios increases student achievement in what? It's reading and math. And again, we had a good majority on that one. So we're talking about math just a little bit, right? Because in math, we often have the question about why do I need to know this? Why on earth would I need to know the Pythagorean theorem? Am I ever going to use this in my life? What you can do with video in math is actually use something we call anchored instruction. So you can give the student a real-life scenario using math that they can experience, then they're likely to understand it and retain it. All right, next question. After we see who's in the lead, we got player, followed by players. All right, next question. Additional research found that students benefit from multimedia, especially in increasing their what? Keyboarding, thinking skills, reading fluency, or vocabulary. Their vocabulary. Oh, I really threw people off with this one. In this particular study, with both groups that were single language and multi-language users across the board, they found when you combine those vocabulary words with some sort of multimedia, they're more likely to retain that information. So next. All right, player. Oh, look at that. All right, we already moved on to question 4. According to 2015 Pew Research, what % of teens have or have access to a cell phone? About 90%, and yeah, we got pretty good. You must have finally got an answer right, huh? It's actually 88% to be exact. And of that 88%, about 90% of those teens are actually texting, and about up to 30 times a day was the average. So they're creating content, right? 90% of those kids are actually creating content and putting it out to their friends, or they're creating videos and putting it out to the world. So I don't know why we have trouble in school getting kids to create content or turn in an assignment when this many kids are doing it on a day-to-day basis. All right, last question. Players still in the lead, though it is tight. We got Game On and Perfect Strangers right behind. Last question. CUNY study survey of 700 K-8 teachers found that what % use digital games in their classroom? Yeah, this was a bit of a trick question because I was actually pleasantly surprised by this data. So this was a substantial increase, about a 48% increase over the last time this study was done. But about 74% of those teachers said they use at least a digital game in the classroom. But, you know, we don't have any guarantee in terms of fidelity or how they're using it in instruction. But that's good news. All right, so let's reveal the winner. Game on! Who's game on? Oh, a single player. Congratulations. I didn't bring anything to give you except you get all the applause of the audience. Yay! All right, so switching back then to the presentation, where have we been? So about 10 years ago, Discovery Education had a very unique opportunity because we were at a crossroads. We could continue using media as a supplemental tool in classrooms and engaging students, or we could choose to get into core instruction. And we had a blank slate. We didn't start with any kind of preconceived notion. We didn't have to have a book, right? So if you have a blank slate, what we were seeing in the market was PDFs, maybe some embedded content. But really, is that what we're going to do? Or are we going to try and do something that is actually taking those creative and innovative minds and really nurturing an environment for students to learn? And so we went more that route. And over the last 10 years, as we've introduced digital textbooks and what we call tech books into classrooms, which are really a totally nonlinear learning experience, we've seen these school districts and even different governments around the globe move from saying, why digital? You know, the question used to be, why on earth would I go digital? I think everybody's starting to get that, and we're moving more to the question of how digital. But we still come back to how digital. How do I get my class to go digital? How do I introduce my teachers to an experience that has more game-based scenarios or introduces video or interactives into the classroom? And the challenge sometimes is more about, I can't envision it, right? So we start with professional development for our teachers, and we trained about 6,500 teachers around the world last year. And as, again, an anchoring in the experience for the teachers, we do a survey. So in the room, we ask teachers, how do you typically teach? And these are self-reported from the teachers. The responses were, well, typically, I lecture in some way. That's how I start out my classes. So about 70% of the teachers were saying lecture. The next group was about 13% is text. Apologize, I can't read this very well from here. About 11% were some sort of hands-on experience, and then a much lesser amount using media. So then you juxtapose that with the 4 learning styles. I'm sure many people in this room are familiar with the VARK categories, V for visual, A for auditory, R for read-write, or K for kinesthetic hands-on. And so loosely, auditory learners would be the ones who were most applicable to hearing a lecture. They could learn the most from the lecture. The read-write by the text. Kinesthetic would most appreciate hands-on, and then the visual learners would probably appreciate media. So we asked these same teachers, how do you learn? And this was how they responded. They learn in terms of auditory learners, read-write learners, kinesthetic learners, and visual learners. They self-identified this. So this was our way of pointing out, maybe we need to make some shifts. Very quickly in the room, who would say you are an auditory learner? Just even probably less than this group here. Read-write, how many of the text-based resources? A greater percentage. Kinesthetic, how many need to be hands-on? Actually, big group. And then finally, visual learners. That's actually me, I'm a visual learner. I'm gonna come back to this later. So one of the pretty key things we instituted when we started developing was this idea of having to personalize for all the different learning styles. So even in the instance of an individual learning object, in this case, on the left you're seeing our glossary terms, on the right you're seeing our social studies reference library. Each learning object is identified for every learning style. So you'll have auditory track, you'll have a visual reference, you'll have text-based resources that appear in multiple languages, and then you'll have some sort of hands-on experience. And to us, hands-on kinesthetic can be virtual. So we don't make that distinction. We'll have both a hands-on, use it in your classroom, and there'll actually be something tactile, or in the terms of a simulation or a game, we consider that kinesthetic as well. And so as we continue to build out our collection of assets and bringing these into classrooms, we take a continued look. Now, your speech earlier quoted numbers a little bit differently, but I think it's the same takeaway, which is today's youth is packing a whole lot of media into the day. So 10 hours and 45 minutes of content, media content into 7.5 hours. How are they doing this? They're multitasking, right? Yeah, so this is actually my kids. I saw somebody's kids earlier, right? And these are my kids. Left-hand side, my 3-year-old son multitasking using the iPad and Legos. And then my daughter, I swear she does have a face. I don't see it all the time because right there she's actually playing Minecraft and watching TV. And this can happen every day around our class or around our household. And so you could make a whole commentary about maybe I shouldn't have my 3-year-old playing with the iPad while he's using the Legos, but let's just, for a minute, think that he just was enjoying it. This is just what he picked up on his own. So for my daughter, who was playing Minecraft, and in 4th grade is the breaking point where 30% of students start saying that they're no longer interested in STEM subjects. Science and math is where you really start losing the kids, is in that 4th grade mark. And so instead of telling my daughter, hey, do you want to do some math? Maybe if I ask her if she wants to do something like Candy Crush or Bejeweled, and of course she has to be my guinea pig when we're testing out our individual simulations. And in this case, it's Shapeshifter. So I had her take a look at this little game, little simulation, and it probably looks like some of the games that you've played or your kids have played. And what the underlying content is showing is arithmetic sequences. So as she was working through to determine how many different shapes she could pull together, and then asked to plot those out, she's determining what the relationship is between the number of shapes she pulled together and the value of the points behind it. I didn't point out that she was doing math, and she was actually doing higher level math than she actually thought she could. And so with that, we take the underlying approach of you can create content for K-12 classrooms on platforms that students like, things that they really enjoy. And so maybe for your elementary students, it's a simple game about bugs that's teaching numeracy. Or maybe for your middle school students, they're interested in zombies, and you're going to teach about greatest common factor through a zombie luau. Or maybe it's for a reluctant high school student trying to learn about statistics, and you do it more through a game-based scenario, in this case, basketball. There's a lot of different ways you can integrate gaming and game-based features. It doesn't have to be long-form gaming, but something to get the students involved and engaged and rewarded. So there's a lot of talk about motivation through badging, and we introduce a badging concept into our math tech book, for example. But we find it very important that it be additive. So in the case of our gaming in levels, students earn badges, but it's all additive. I'm going to come back to this in a minute. My daughter, who I said was a little bit reluctant about math, one of the reasons is because she had a bad game-based experience. She was using a program where she went through levels, and each level had 10 questions. She'd get to the 9th question. If she got it wrong or even keyed it in wrong, it brought her back to 0. And that is really demotivating. So this is a personal experience, but we see this in action, right? There's being able to get to that level and gain, very additive, very motivating. And maybe they don't get numbers or gain any additional badges, but they're at least not being put back to the beginning. So I'm going to shift a little bit in the interest of time here, talk about virtual reality. And I'm going to talk about it from a couple of different contexts. So first from an adult learning perspective, and I'm going to ask for a volunteer. We had a lot of kinesthetic learners in here. Somebody probably near here, Elizabeth, is going to help out again. She's got an Oculus device. So who is willing to put this on and look a little silly? So as Elizabeth gets you set up, what you're going to be seeing is the classroom experience, right, Elizabeth? All right. And we are seeing here, just running as a video, the same video. So I mentioned earlier, we had a lot of teachers not saying, why should I go digital or why should I be more interactive? It's how. How on earth do I go digital? Common misconception is that you need one-to-one. All right, here we go. And so in order for our teachers to feel a little more confident in what that experience is and to show them that they don't necessarily need one-to-one, we shot this video in a classroom in virtual reality. And you can walk around the classroom and you can see, first of all, it's not one-to-one. You don't necessarily need a computer for every student. You can see that, well, my video ran out here, but you could see that there were actually kids doing hands-on. There were some kids who were using iPads. Some kids were writing. Most importantly, it was collaborative, right? So in this case, on the video, kids were actually working together. This type of experience gave teachers a little more, again, situational understanding of how to apply this in a classroom. From a student learning experience, this is a video of sharks, right? So immersed in the sharks, and I know we have this video on the Oculus as well in case over lunch anybody is interested in getting a little seasick while they're eating. You can put this on and experience a little more of the situation if you were immersed in with sharks. Everything we're talking about here is engagement, right? It's getting the kids engaged and really involved in their learning. Yeah, he can walk around on it all day if he likes. Thank you. What'd you think? It was awesome. Awesome. All right, thank you. You looked awesome. You did. Thank you for participating. Most importantly is we're finding this is working. So we're only a couple years into wide distribution of the tech book in classrooms. Science was the first one we came out with. And in Collier County, Florida, they're already experiencing double-digit point gains on their end-of-year assessments in both 5th and 8th grade. What I don't show here, though, is we're seeing greater proportional gains in students where English is not their first language, and we find that a really important distinction, is many of the tools that are really inherent in both digital content and on the devices, things like highlighting and note-taking and text-to-speech and multi-language abilities, are really helping populations who in the past would struggle with this type of content. So I'm going to shift and go a little bit to where we're going and some of the partners that we're working with, great companies around the globe, who are doing some really interesting things in 21st century learning adventures, as we're calling them. So we're seeing situations and companies like Intel who are developing online learning modules around cybersecurity. We're working with a group called Envision around the presidential election and getting students involved with that. These are sometimes virtual experiences, online games. Sometimes they're virtual field trips where we're taking students on site. Places like the Tower of London, where you may not have ever been able to go before to celebrate Remembrance Day. And ultimately, in working with all these great companies, we're really hoping to get around the message that STEM is more than an acronym. Everybody talks about STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, or STEAM, with the A for the arts. And I've been joking I'm going to start calling it STEMella so that we can introduce English language arts and just make it one big acronym to cover all the different subject areas. But it's more about a philosophy. It's not about the acronym, right? STEM is about really creating a learning environment that's transdisciplinary, that you're going to get all of the different learning subjects, that you're going to be collaborative, that you're going to teach skills where kids can learn things that are going to prepare them for jobs that we don't even know about. And so as part of that, working with these great companies, we're able to get more experiences out at no cost for the schools and show kids that learning can be fun and engaging and actually create those skills in you that you need to be successful. I'm going to show you one specific example around Madden and EA Sports and the NFL Players Association that just launched last week with a virtual field trip. But it's about football by the numbers, to teach critical science and math concepts with a game that every kid can relate to and most kids enjoy at least watching. So here's just a quick piece on that program.
Welcome to EA Sports, Madden NFL Football by the numbers. I'm Rex Ryan. Football is a fast-paced game. There are a lot of quick decisions to be made. It helps to be athletic, but it also helps to understand the math and science behind football. Now it's time to look at the math and science behind passing. In this section, we're going to learn the basics of defensive play call.
So that was just a little quick snippet of the math and science behind football. Another important piece of STEM, though, is relating that back to skills that they would need for college and career readiness. So why would I need this in order to find a job? And so the virtual field trip that we did last week made that connection back to careers that would be related to building that program. So behind the scenes, you see that there's engineers and there's creative artists and there's UX designers and all these great careers that kids might not have otherwise been exposed to. And again, this was free for any student, teacher, or parent to log on to and be a part of. Another quick example, Toyota and their program, Teen Drive 365, multi-component initiative. Anybody who has a teenager in their household knows just how scary it is to have them driving. And so the goal of this program is to give the kids some awareness and some ownership of that distracted driving problem. So there's one component is a game where every so often as they're using it, something will pop up. My dog is a genius, and what is the outcome? Well, you might hit a pedestrian. So, and as you can imagine, kids respond to this. And then the other key component of this program is that we challenge kids to come up with a video that highlights the really dangers of distracted driving. They can submit it, just their own video creation, and then there's a voting component, which I think is going on right now, actually, if you want to vote on the current submissions for the Toyota Teen Drive 365. The winner receives a cash award as well as the opportunity to get their program, their video that they conceptualize, professionally produced by a Discovery crew, and then it goes on the air. So getting students really to take some ownership of not only the problem, but as I described that, they're writing a script, they're shooting it on their own, they're creating content, and they're competing with others to really develop those 21st century skills. So, ultimately the ROI of play in education, play is fun, play makes learning fun. Learning that is fun will have engaged students, and ultimately they're going to be more successful not only in their classroom, but in the world. And this is an example of one student, Osman Yahya, who is just a terrific kid. And he had an opportunity through one of our virtual field trips to actually interview President Obama, and being able to create those experiences for those kids who are really enjoying their classroom learning is really what it's all about for us. I want to do this quote justice. Imagine if kids poured their time and passion into a video game that taught math concepts while they barely noticed because it was so enjoyable. And that's why we're all here today, and certainly what Discovery Education is committed to doing. All right, I think I have probably 3 minutes for some questions. Any questions? All right, you guys are just exhausted from all the gameplay.
Partnerships that you have here and overseas in sort of building out your curriculum and your reach and sort of connecting with the kids that you're trying to engage?
No, that's a terrific question related to the partnerships that we have. So in K-12 education, we develop programs that can typically be funded by a school district, so science, math, social studies. Then we partner with corporations for the programs, the educational initiatives that are typically underfunded or there's no funding at all, so that we can bring those into schools at no cost. So whether it's distracted driving, STEM as a specific topic area is not funded on its own, so making that connection there. Even like the presidential election, cybersecurity, coding, some things that most people think naturally should be funded as part of K-12 education isn't. And so finding corporate partners to bring those in at no cost to schools has been incredibly beneficial. And then it's a joint development effort, so we have the curriculum expertise on staff, and then we work with any curriculum experts that the partners have. Yeah.
STEAM officially will happen, or if it'll add other letters as well? Where you see the trajectory on that?
Well, you know, I heard STEAM quite a few years ago now, and I actually thought it would get more traction than it has. We see it in pockets, but as we shift away from it being science, technology, engineering, arts, math, less about the letters and more about transdisciplinary, ultimately it should include every single letter, and it just becomes a catchphrase. But every transdisciplinary lesson should be within a STEM type of approach to teaching and learning. Yeah, so I'm only half joking about the STEM-ella, you know, because it really should include English language arts. Yep.
So we were joking earlier about penalizing kids, taking points away from them, and I also took a question about learning the hard way and making mistakes. What have you found with, you know, in your experiences with penalizing kids and you know, giving them demerits rather than sort of the more modern attitude of everyone wins and you don't really get points taken away from you?
Well, I think there's a fine line in between there, right? I don't like penalizing kids. I don't want to demotivate so much that they're not inclined to even try. On the flip side, though, the conversation earlier was really interesting. Implanting and then not having to persevere to learn. Wow, we'd really be missing an important part of the learning process, because that perseverance, that grit, that determination is really what's going to make a successful kid in the future. So I think it's in between, right? You don't need to penalize, but they need to be motivated to keep on trying. And that ability to fail and creating an environment that encourages trial and failure, but not getting sent back, right? Just in a safe environment, I can try until I do better. Do we have any more time? We're done? Okay. Thank you, everybody.